Good afternoon. I'm Jen Holtz, Associate State Director for Outreach at AARP Maryland. As the weather warms up and vaccines are abound, we are continuing to bring you inspiring interviews and practical resources to support everyone out there caring for a child during the pandemic. Many are starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel, and in keeping with the theme of reuniting and an impending return to normalcy, I would like to introduce you to two very special guests today for our Lunch and Learn. May is Older Americans Month, and there's no question that our older Americans contribute to our community, our families, and our culture in immeasurable ways. We are so excited to highlight the work of one individual, Mr. Levi Frazier, who has taken to the art of writing in his retirement. He will chat today about his transition to becoming an author later in life and the very intergenerational aspect of his work. Also, I always smile ear to ear when we have the opportunity to work with former AARP colleague and current volunteer, Lily Liu. She has been a wonderful asset to our team in her retirement. Lily and Levi were inspired by one another a few years back at an AARP event, so it seems fitting to reunite them today for this virtual offering. And with that, Lily, I will pass the mic to you.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Hello, everyone. Happy Older Americans Month. Happy especially a shout out to the teachers to Teacher Appreciation Week. Yesterday being National Teachers Day, I was rooting for everyone. I come from a family of educators, so this is a very special week for us. I still remember my mother's anecdotes about being a middle school teacher. And literally the other day, someone called, she had been a teacher in Taiwan, and they said to my mom, "Teacher, we ourselves are now turning 80. And I thought, oh, this is the impact that all of you as educators have on the next generation. So happy Teacher Appreciation Day. I am so delighted because this conversation with a dear friend, Levi Frazier Jr., is just bringing two old friends together. We were very fortunate to meet up, and we're so lucky to have this. And so thank you so much to AARP Maryland. And don't forget, today is also Cinco de Mayo. Feliz Cinco de Mayo. There's so many wonderful commemorations during this month and today to our Latinx brothers and sisters. Most important, for Older Americans Month, I remember for decades, I have collected the proclamations out. And I'd like to read, if I may, the 2021 proclamation. It is such a beautiful wording. During Older Americans Month, we celebrate older Americans and the key role they play in sharing the wisdom and experience that inform today's decisions and actions, and fostering the connection and engagement that build strong, resilient communities, and I'd like to add, families. So it's my honor to be able to greet my dear old friend, Levi Frazier Jr., whom I had met just crossing paths at an AARP national event almost 2 decades ago, right, Levi?
Almost, yes.
Yes. And I truly consider you and your lovely wife, Deborah, Renaissance man and woman. Kindly give me an update on where you are professionally and what you had been doing all these years in Memphis, Tennessee, please.
Well, thank you, Lily. So happy to be here, to be a guest of you and those other who are working on this program from AARP. And our friendship, of course, goes back some years, and I want to say how much I appreciate you and the support you've given me since we first met. Okay. Well, right now, Blues City Cultural Center is an organization that my wife and I started 42 years ago. Oh. And we have been working with that organization to bring the arts to the people. As we say, arts for a better way of life. Right now in the pandemic, we aren't doing as much as we did in the past. And believe it or not, we've passed the torch on to my daughter, who's now running the organization. So we are taking a step back, although I'm still artistic director until we get someone else in their position. But we've taken a giant step back, and she's really heading the organization. She's at the helm, and she's doing a great job, I might add. We have moved into a new location, and we have different programs that we put together. actually, we work on a Tennessee Williams festival. This will be our third year coming up. The festival is in Mississippi, and in Clarksville, and we actually have a presentation that we had a presentation that we made last year, and we'll make a different presentation this year. The presentation we made last year was about 3 African-American writers from the Mississippi Delta, and we featured them in a Zoom presentation for the Tennessee Williams Festival. So that's one of the things we're doing, and we're working with young people during the pandemic. My daughter's working with the young people on speaking well and acting on Zoom. On Zoom. So we're doing that, and just other things that we're doing to stay abreast of what's happening in the community, because we're very community oriented. We take our work to the community because we see that there's a need to do that.
That's brilliant. That has always been AARP's work. We are a nationwide organization with a state office in every state. And that's why having AARP Maryland bring us together is so touching. Now, it's so interesting because I have met one of your sons.
Yes.
So give us an update, because he's actually in this area, in the Maryland area. And I looked at him and I said to myself, he is the best blend of both you and Deborah.
Well, thank you. Yes, Matthew. He's in the DC area. I think it's called Lanham, Maryland. Yeah, he's there, and he has a baby. The baby's, I think I told you yesterday, she went to daycare yesterday for her first time. So it was, I think the parents had to go by Starbucks and kind of talk about that situation and see, wow, what's going to happen? So everybody's grown some in this whole process. So yeah, Matthew's there, and he loves Maryland. He works from home, and he's kind of been a Mr. Mom for about almost a year and a half. So we want to say, continue to grow, Matt, and continue to grow your family, and Yada, you guys have a great time together and just enjoy life.
See, that's what's so lovely about the Frazier family, now that I know multiple generations, is you're so loving and you form such beautiful intergenerational ties.
Well, thank you.
And that's why I think it's been so fascinating for me to catch up on the fact that you've always created content, whether it's plays, whether it's books. So what has made you sort of pivot now into children's literature?
Well, to be honest with you, I think my personality really has been headed that way a long time. I have written about 3 tragedies, but I like humor. I like children. And I think the children in all of us speaks to me sometimes and says, this needs to be put out for other children who might be 80 years old or 5 years old. And so that actually put me in a position to sit back and think and say, I think I should do this, and I think I'll do it now. And so what I do now also, Lily, is this. When you're younger, sometimes you'll wait and say, I'll get it done later. But for many reasons, today you say, I better do it now. And so that's what happened with these books that I have now. I said, you know what? I need to do this now. As a matter of fact, what I Love You So Much, the idea came to me, and I was in bed. I said, okay, I don't feel like getting up. And then that voice said, you need to get up now. And that's what I did.
Oh, I see. So that's the story. Well, you have been so gracious, you and Deborah, and gifted me with copies of your books. I just love this I Love You So Much book so much. Now, it was fascinating for me to read that, number one, you worked in your own grandchildren, right?
Yes.
And also you worked in the times, these odd times that
Yes.
were. Give me an idea of why the pandemic and your family worked its way into this brilliant work.
Well, as a creative person, writer, but if I were a painter, I would have done the same thing. We take those things that are near and dear to our hearts, sometimes troubling things, but we put them into a creative form. And that's what happened with this. It was something about the pandemic. I'm at home and I'm thinking about all these things we're supposed to do: not touch your grandchildren, not be around your grandchildren, not touch your friends, don't hug anymore. And so all these things are coming to me like, okay, so something needs to be said. And I'm thinking about my grandchildren. I just had a child born, Matt's child. And it says, I love you so much, because at this point, we're looking at situations where you can't even visit your parents or grandparents in the hospital. You can't even visit your grandchildren. And so, but you still love them. And so the title just came to me, I love you so much. And that's how it all started. Yes.
Oh, that's wonderful, because you're right. That social distancing meant physical distancing, and yet you can reach across the distance with love. Oh,
Yes, you can.
would you honor us with just a little bit of a reading from this beautiful book?
I
It's
would,
so nice.
I would love to.
Oh, thank you. And so it's literally like fresh off the presses, because
Yeah.
it's, really timely for the pandemic. Thank you.
Okay. Well, oftentimes I like to interject humor into my books. And this little book is about a granddaughter who talks about how much she loves her grandfather, the things that they do. And so we'll just read a small passage. It says, I love you so much. Let's play in the sun. I love you so much to laugh at your puns. I love you so much in spite of your snores. I love you so much to open your doors. And I put that in because, as a grandfather, I like to have little puns, little jokes with my grandchildren. And then with the pandemic, we were so aware of everything that we touched. And so she's like, well, Granddad, I don't even want you to open the door. I'll open your door for you. And so that love between grandfather and granddaughter, and the granddaughter being helpful to the grandfather, is something that really inspired me.
Oh, that I get the resonance of that now. That is beautiful. In your own life, was a grandparent present in your own life?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. My grandmother on my mother's side, both my grandparents, sets of grandparents on father's side and mother's side were there. But my grandmother and father on my mother's side was closer, because sometimes I would stay with them when my parents went to work. And so I learned so much from my grandmother on my mother's side. She was the child of a slave. My great-grandfather was born in 1855. And when the Union Army came through Rossville, Tennessee, the slaves were told, these Yankee devils. And so he hid under a cauldron, a big black cauldron, because he was afraid of the Yankee devils, not knowing that they were coming to liberate him. So my grandmother would tell me stories and teach me songs. And really, she was my first teacher, because she would teach me how to write, certain things. She would teach me how to count. She taught me how to count with my fives and tens. And it was just a natural thing. And she had a lot of spools around because she sewed. And so I guess that's how I came up with the spools, because she would put the spools on a string, and I would have these spools on a string to play with sometimes. And so spools were close to me, near and dear to my heart, in a sense. Yeah.
Yes, I have that book behind me on displays. The Schools Move In. And that's a lovely book also, because it talks about the importance of diversity and inclusion. What was your late grandmother's name, please, so we honor her?
Her name was Fannie Lee Keith. But before she was a Keith, she was a Crutchfield.
Oh.
Crutchfield.
Yeah.
A good English name, Crutchfield. So somewhere in that background, the Crutchfields were probably owners of this group of people that included my grandmother.
Well, I'd like to have both of us take a sip of something to honor your ancestors, because they created you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yes. Well, I think what you've just said, though, is very important, which is how to create intergenerational ties, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It can be as simple as telling a story. What have you been thinking of doing with your own grandchildren that would be tips for others that are on this audience today?
Well, interestingly enough, the pandemic has allowed several things to happen in my life that have been good. One is I've slowed down quite a bit, which I needed, because I was going too much. And I know I don't have to tell baby boomers that we think we can do everything in the world and then some. And so I thought the same thing until I slowed down and realized you were going too much. A lot of the mistakes you were making is because you didn't have the time to concentrate and focus like you should have. And so I slowed down, and it also gave me and my wife and my daughter and my sister the time to homeschool my granddaughter, my middle granddaughter. So we did that. And Leland, let me tell you, it is such an experience. I actually had her day before yesterday.
Yes.
And we covered some things. And then my wife, Deborah, has her today. And they're going to the zoo today. As a matter of fact, they're at the zoo right now. And so I guess everybody doesn't have that opportunity to homeschool, but you can get with them and go places and just talk to them wherever you go, because interestingly enough, these things will come back to them years later. And they say, I remember talking to grandmother about this or granddad about this, and they said this, and this is what they meant. Now I understand. And we have the knowledge that it will come back to them.
Yes.
It will come back to them. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he shall not depart. And so we know this, so we need to put that out there so they'll have this information.
That is brilliant. I think any of the grandparents and parents on today with us will take that as a very important tip. You don't know what's going to be of influence in the future.
You don't. You really don't.
Well, for anyone who's a grandparent now, or even a parent who would like to write things down, staring at a blank page or looking at the computer screen can be intimidating.
It can be.
As a writer, do you have any tips?
The first tip is to trust your instincts. Trust your instinct. Writing is a process, just like painting, just like drawing, just like picking up a musical instrument. It's a process. Oftentimes, we have a natural or innate ability that we're not aware of because we've never been encouraged to do it. I feel great because my grandmother, from the very beginning, as far back as I can remember, encouraged me to write because she had this old fountain pen. I know she was tired of me getting ink all over the house, but I would put the ink in the pen and I would scribble my hieroglyphics. And she would always say, that's nice, that's good. And so writing was something I can't even remember not wanting to do as a child. It goes back as far as I can remember being a child. And I can remember pretty far back. So I would encourage anybody to trust their instincts, write, keep writing. And then if you don't feel good just letting anybody see it, you can find somebody that you trust and just ask them, what do they think about it? And at the very least, the writing can be cathartic to get things out. Oftentimes we harbor things, our fears, our trepidations, but if we just get it out, oftentimes we'll feel much better. And so the writing will not only help you in that respect, it will also help those people who read it, because you don't know that somebody else may be going through the same thing you're going through.
Yeah.
So once they read it, it's like, oh, wow, how did you know that? You say, I didn't know it. They say, but did you hit it? You hit it right on the nose. But it's because there's a spiritual connection with all of us.
That's a beautiful way of putting that. Now that you have these beautiful picture books in your hand, I can already see in my mind's eye you sitting there with a grandchild and turning the pages together. Did you like to read as a child then too?
I love to read. And speaking of turning the pages as a child, one of the best pictures that I've seen in a long time has been a picture of Matthew with Mariah turning the pages of I love you so much. And she's looking in the book. She was only about 9 months then, but she looks like she's so focused. And that is something that I love to see. Yes, but I've always loved to write. I can't remember not loving to write.
Is there an African-American author that you can't wait until your grandchildren can read him or her?
Well, you know what? I need to go back and read some of the younger authors who are out here that write children's books. And I've met this guy named Alexander. I can't remember his name, but I was on a call with him. He's a children's Kwame Alexander, I believe.
Oh,
Yes. Yeah. He was on a call a workshop and I actually sat in on it. But I would love for her to read his books. And then when she gets older, I would love for her to, now this is kind of heavy stuff. So older, Richard Wright,
Yes.
James Baldwin, Margaret Walker,
Yes.
and many others like that I think she would benefit greatly from reading.
Yes, and I just was on something also with the celebration of the birthday anniversary of August Wilson, you know.
Oh, yes.
So it was just within the past few days. Yes.
Oh, wow. I had the chance to meet him twice at a National Black Theater Festival. We got a chance to talk.
Oh my goodness. Yes, because theater has also been very much a part of your and Deborah's life.
It has been. Yeah. My friends and I formed our first theater company about 52 years ago, right out of college. So we formed our first theater company. Yeah.
Yes. Well, going to the library when we can, because there will be librarians on this call also, on this event also. How do you help a child choose a book? You know, if you were to hold Mariah and take her into a library, what would you like them to do once they enter the library? Just the act of walking in.
Well, you it's like you're reading my mind. Libraries have been for me since I was a child a sacred place.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at the vaulted ceilings, it's almost like a church. And so you go in, and it's a certain reverence that you have, at least I have, when I go into a library, still today.
Yes.
And so I want my child to have that same reverence, because what I used to do when I was younger, even up until I was in my 40s, whenever I travel, the first place that I would go to out of town is a library. I would always like to visit the libraries wherever I went. And I just felt at home there. And so when I have my granddaughter with me, I would love for her to be with me, and I'll just walk down the aisles and point to certain books, and I'll see what captures her attention. I'll just mention certain things and see what resonates with her. And then I will take that to move to the next step, which is pull it off the shelf, let her look at it. And if that doesn't resonate, we'll go somewhere else and let her see another book. And we'll talk. And I think that's the big thing, just communicating with the child or your grandchild, talking, listening to them as they talk and you listen.
Oh, that's beautiful. No wonder we're kindred spirits, me and Deborah, because I too have that very important, I think there's a little bit of an echo, sorry. I too have a very important entry into every community. I do also go to the library.
Okay.
Now, these are tough times, especially for Black men.
Yeah.
And Black men as fathers. Do you have any pearls of wisdom? I know we hadn't really thought about this to talk about it, but it just came up as I think about you as a Black grandfather, African-American grandfather. Any tips for the young men out there?
Well, again, thanks for reading my mind. I have a good friend who's my age, and we walk every morning, at least Monday through Friday. And we did 6 miles today, had a great time. And we talk often about this thing. And today we talked about bringing the joy back to life, enjoying life, because there's so many issues. There's so many things that we could be upset about, because every time you turn on the news, there's something. I mean, in 1 week, you could hear about 3 Black men getting killed, 3 Black men doing something, And so the news is full of these things, proliferation of bad things happening. And so how do you keep from being depressed? How do you keep from hanging your head saying, oh, I might as well just go along with everything else that I see. It's terrible. But you have to put the joy back into your life. Think about those great things that you've done, people have done to help you, that you've done to help other people, and go from there. Another thing we talked about this morning, is mentorship. There should be a certain type of mentorship that is ongoing, where you can sit down, or we can sit down with a group of Black men, young Black men, and just talk and break bread, because oftentimes you talk better over food. And just talk about issues that they want to bring up and that you feel free to talk about, and just do that because those things help. Going back to what we talked about earlier about a young child, so when you talk about these things, they don't go unnoticed. At some point, somebody will say, you know what? Jabose Okwamabwa, that's my friend's name. He's Nigerian.
Mm-hmm.
He said this. Mr. Jabose said that, and wow, it's true. It's happening to me now. You know, and they told us about being married, about being husbands, about being fathers. And now I'm experiencing it. I kind of know what to do, you know. So those kinds of things I think are very important. We have to continue to be mentors in our children's lives, especially our young Black men who oftentimes are having problems, especially today.
Yes, no, that is so wise. And I think what I've always respected about Deborah, your wife, and you is that you have always used the arts in order to teach, to inform, and to entertain.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything that you're proudest of from those years leading arts and cultural activities?
You know, there are so many things that we have done, Lily, and so many things we have to do that I'd say one program that we've done quite often is a program called The Right Thing. Well, it's a program that we use a play called Ritual Murder in it.
Mm-hmm.
And Ritual Murder is about a young man who kills his best friend for calling him a name.
Okay.
And it's part of a program that we have. And we do the play, and then we break the young people into groups, and they talk about what they saw. And we have two health mentors. You know, they can be physical health, mental health, whatever. But we have them in the room, and so they talk to the young people,
Mm-hmm.
to encourage them and to get them to talk. And then we also have an artist in the room. So the artist might be a visual artist, a performing artist, photographer, a videographer. And what happens at the end of the sessions, we come together and the children or young people have to work with the artist to put together a program or play or a video or a poem or a small mural about what they discussed about this situation that they saw. Mm-hmm. And it's called Peace in the House. Yes, that's the name of it. Peace in the House. That's the name of the program. And we've been doing this program, I know 25 years. Yeah, at least 25 years. And the play Ritual Murder was written by a fellow by the name of Tom Dent. He was from New Orleans. And it's one of the best plays that I've ever seen. Yes.
Peace in the House. I
Peace
love
in the House is a program. Yes.
That's so needed, especially in these times. What wisdoms would you like to convey as an older American during this month? Why keep active? Why are you writing? Because I think your writing has kept your brain very healthy and you've been able to be creative. Any tips for others who might say, you know, I may not want to do this, but, you know, convince me why we should?
Okay. Because it is healthy for the brain. Mm-hmm. You want to write, you want to draw, you want to paint, mm-hmm. You want to be a photographer. And so I'm not just restricting it to writing, but that's my thing. But it helps you get focused on who you are, which mm-hmm. is very important. And also it helps you help other people. That's what I like about it.
Oh.
So when it's not just for you. You know, and I know many people, they would help other people before they help themselves. And mm-hmm. So for those people out there like that, this is a great way to do it. Once you're creative and you reimagine, and I say that because it's not just a word I came up with, it's Tom Peters' book called Reimagine, a very creative book. It's a mm-hmm. guru, a business guru.
Yes.
And so we have to reimagine ourselves with this creativity. We have to reimagine how the world could be. We have to and once we do and we put it out there, it's a great feeling to have. And again, it helps other people as well. And so going back to that word trust your instinct to do it and go ahead and do it.
Wonderful. I don't think you're going to stop writing. Do you have any projects ahead that you're thinking of and kicking around in your mind right now?
Well, actually, I'm part of a program, a writer development program. We're developing a new play through theater company in Memphis called Hattie Lou Theater, and I was one of 4 writers chosen. And I have a play that I have developed. The requirements were only has to be 2 people in the play,
Okay.
and it has to be no more than 30 minutes long. And so I wrote my piece, and so I will be meeting with Jeffrey Owen. Many of you might not know his name personally, but Jeffrey is a person who was on the Cosbys. He played the Cosbys' oldest daughter's husband.
Oh, yes. That young man yes, he's been doing a lot since the show.
Yes, and I'm meeting with him tomorrow, as a matter of fact. He's going to look at the play and we're going to talk about it. And so I was very fortunate to be part of that. So that's the newest thing that I'm working on right now. And I can't tell you how many ideas I have. We'll be on for another 30 minutes, an hour.
I think your grandmother instilled in you the best feature, which is curiosity.
Yes.
Yeah.
She did. She and your oldest sister, both of them, because my older sister would take me to the library. And at that time, the libraries were segregated in Memphis.
Right.
And they had a bookmobile not too far away. And she would take me to the bookmobile, and that's where we would get books. So I had a love from reading from the very beginning.
Oh, my goodness. Do you remember one book early on?
You know what? I don't remember a book because I just devoured everything I could get my hands on.
Right.
Everything. Now, my oldest son, Levi, the third, he loved the big red dog. What's his name?
Yes, Clifford.
Clifford.
Yes.
He loved everything Clifford. And then one day, I had bought this Clifford book, and he said, "Dad, okay, don't like Clifford anymore." I was crestfallen. I was like, "Oh no, you don't like Clifford anymore." But it just goes to show you, things change, people change.
Yes, they grow up.
Yes, they do grow up.
So being able to introduce your grandchildren not only to books, but your books, I think just really touches my heart. What about children who at a time might not want to read? You know, are there any tips you might have to help someone who right then may not want to learn how to read when it's a more negative experience? Any tips?
Well, I think the main thing is to communicate, talk with the children. And because oftentimes once you talk about something long enough, you want to read about it because you say, you know, we talked about this yesterday. I got a book that talks about it even more. I think you would love this book. And then you get them to read it. Another thing I think that would happen is this. If there are certain books out here that you can write to them or go online and they will actually put the name of the child in the book. And so you say, okay, one day, Michaela or Mariah was walking down the street and she saw her dad. And so you would read those, and it's about them personally. And that's what I would do. I would make up stories and include their names in it. And I think if you did that, that would get them really interested in reading.
Oh, that's a beautiful tip. I still remember my late father telling my youngest brother a story that just, was every night there was an episode, something about the yellow dragon, put him to sleep. But then my father would fall asleep. My brother would ask, "What happened next? What happened?" That's true. Storytelling is very good. That's a very good tip. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Did your grandmother lived to see you into adulthood?
Yes, she did. Not only that, but she lived to see me get involved in theater.
Yes.
And I would take her to some of the shows. At that age, she was older, but she would see me on stage and she couldn't separate me from being on stage. And she said, "Oh, son," and out in the audience, and I'm like, "What is going on?" And so during intermission, I would run out there and say, "Okay, it's me. I'm all right. And I go backstage and get ready. Yeah. So she got a chance to have that experience.
Oh my goodness, you've really done your ancestors proud. Looking ahead for your grandchildren, how can we as older Americans help in our own small way to make our communities better, to make our nation better? What is it that you would encourage all of us to do as we celebrate Older Americans Month?
I think what we need to do is believe that we can make a difference.
Oh.
I oftentimes see situations where younger people, not saying all young people, will look at the older Americans, us older Americans, and think, well, they've made their contribution. It's time for them to, let us, but that's not necessarily true because we still have a contribution to make, even if it's just letting those pearls of wisdom fall in front of them, they may pick up and say, this is true. This is true. And so don't be afraid. Again, here we go with trust. Trust that what you're saying will have an impact. Trust that what you're doing will have an impact. And you don't have to try to do it all. Just focus on one thing, maybe one person, or work with one group. Because I know a lot of older Americans are now volunteers,
yes,
like you are,
yeah.
and many of us are. And so get involved on whatever level you can. And as the young people say, get in where you fit in.
Oh, yes, I like that.
Mm-hmm.
When someone uses that term young at heart,
yes,
I've been trying to think about what that really means. What does it mean to you? What does being, because it's not, what is that funny thing? Age is only a number if you don't, yeah. So for you, young at heart means what in this time?
Young at heart at this time, especially this time, because of the pandemic, and we're still in it, coming out of it,
Yeah.
still in it, means that you, going back to Peter's book, you reimagine better times ahead.
Okay.
You reimagine that things can get better.
Okay.
You see life as a progression, not only a progression that sometimes goes awry, but a progression that can be improved upon. And you know what? I can improve upon it. That's what young at heart means. And I can have an effect. And then when you look around at the young people or the people that you have helped, especially as teachers, just like you were saying about your mother, when they write you and say, I really appreciate what you did for me. I really appreciate, just being in your class. I really appreciate your help. I had a young man who graduated this past Saturday. He emailed me and said, Mr. Frazier, Professor Frazier, I really appreciate taking your class and the things that you had me involved in. He was one of the ones I chose to be part of the Tennessee Williams Festival to be in my play. And I helped him get a national commercial. He was part of a national commercial, or PSA rather.
Yes.
And so he thanked me for it. And so we can have that effect. We just have to believe we can, which helps us with that young heart. If you believe, as a man or woman thinketh, so is he or she. So if we think we're effective, if we think we'll have an impact, by golly, we will have one.
You've been a professor for the past few years. Tell us about the university you've been at and what you've been teaching.
Okay. I first started out at the University of Memphis. I taught theater, and I had a play produced there. I taught both the graduate class in theater and undergrad class. Now at the community college, Southwest Tennessee Community College, and I teach theater. I'm also director of the theater program there. And so we have been producing plays, and we started out maybe one play a year, or one play every other year. But once I got there, I said, no, we can do better than this. So we started doing 3 plays a year. And we entered this contest. It's called the Ostrander Awards, which is like the local Tony Awards. You had the University of Memphis there, Rhodes College, which is a small private college that I went to when I was here, when I was there. And so we competed against them, and we won Best Actor, Best Actress. And with this community college, we won a Best Play. As a matter of fact, I had a play called When It Rains. It won Best Play about 4 years ago. And it's been a lovely, I guess, 16 years almost teaching at that school. And I have enjoyed it. I'm retiring at the end of the summer. Devote more time to helping my daughter with our company, Blue City Cultural Center, and to writing and hopefully doing some traveling. Because when I was at Southwest, now that I'm still there though, I started a study abroad program. And we went to London. I took my students to London. I took my students to Greece for 5 years, to London 3 years, and to Poland. And so we had a great time. I just have treasured those memories that I've had with my students and my colleagues at Southwest Tennessee Community College.
Yes, community colleges, I've always said, are where it's happening.
Yes.
Really. I mean, the type of student bodies that they attract, they're really very important to our educational system.
Yes, they are.
Yes.
Yes, they are.
So as a drama instructor, would you have any tips for someone who is a little hesitant about going on stage?
Well, I think the main thing is once you go over your lines enough, these little techniques, once you go over your lines enough, once you rehearse enough, it really builds your confidence. It really builds your confidence. And then you have to understand that everybody makes mistakes. We're not perfect. Sometimes the mistakes, you'll say something or do something on stage and people say, oh, I like the way you did that. And it's like, well, you did. Well, it really wasn't what I intended to do, but thank you very much. Or you might just say thank you. So we just encourage people at our age to get involved. And theater is a great way to get involved. I know some people who just picked up acting at 50, at 60, and they're doing a great job at it and enjoy it. Oh, man, just to see the joy on their faces once they come off stage and the people saying, I want your autograph. People saying, you did a great job. Priceless.
Yes,
absolutely priceless.
The arts and culture add so much to life as seniors, as older Americans.
Yes.
If you had to think about what your grandmother's sort of like motto of life might have been, maybe it was something biblical, maybe she quoted a proverb. How do you think she approached her older age? She had joy, of course, in knowing you as her grandchild. Did she have like I don't know how to say it. Like, what did she teach you about aging? Maybe that's the best question.
What did she teach me about aging? Yeah. In the process of aging herself, she taught me that aging can be graceful. Because the way she aged and how she was a very low-key individual, but she was very wise. So she didn't raise her voice, but she would give you information. And another thing that my sisters and I always talk about, she has such a sense of humor, a muted sense of humor. And so we would always laugh at some of the things that she said. And we still laugh today. And that actually helps us as a family, as siblings, because when we get together, and we try to have a siblings lunch or dinner once a month, and when we get together, we talk about our parents and our grandparents and what they would say. And we often go back to what our grandmother would say and how she would act. And she was a very caring person. And so when people from the country would come to the city and they would stay with her and my grandfather, and they always call her Aunt Fanny. Of course, it's Aunt Fanny, but they call her Aunt Fanny.
Yeah.
And she loved them. And that's one of the things that I look back on and I see that extended family and how people really cared. Not to say they don't today, but I know that they really cared back then about visiting people.
Yes.
They just come visit and sit with you. And especially if they were sick, they just sit with you and be in the room with you and comfort you. And that's something that we need to continue.
That's a beautiful memory. Thank you for highlighting that.
Sure.
We forget how the simple things in life can actually mean so much.
Yes, so very much.
How old did Grandma live to be before she passed?
She was around 86, 87.
Yes. Oh, what a blessing you all had her. Yes.
Yes.
And the fact that your family, the older sisters and you still gather and have the family gatherings, that's a beautiful thing. If you had one thing to tell your sons about how to raise their children, would there be some wisdom that you saw from your own parents and grandparents?
You know what? The biggest thing is to remain close. My mother would say, don't be so close that air can't come between you.
Oh.
Yes, he said. And another saying that she had was, wear the world like a loose-fitting garment and be willing to drop it at any time.
Oh.
So I remember all these things, and I need to write them down, actually, because they stay with me. They've stuck with me over the years. So just the closeness, because there are things that will come up, and we're human beings, and we'll, get mad, we'll lash out, but try to retain that closeness if you can. Yeah.
Yes, that's you're right about. Maybe that's another book. Is the. I think you're going to be going on. As Deborah, your lovely wife, whom I've also met, taught you something about being a grandmother. Watching her with her grandchildren, your grandchildren. Have you looked at her and realized, oh, she's brought something?
Oh yes, Deborah is a laugher. She laughs. I tell you what, you can tell when she's in the room. As a matter of fact, you can tell when she's 3 rooms over because she laughs She has such a great laugh. And her mother was a laugh.
Yeah.
It's a certain joy that they have.
Yes.
And so my granddaughter really gravitates to it because they get a chance to laugh a lot. They love the zoo. My granddaughter loves to go to the zoo. And so when they're at the zoo, they laugh, they have a great time. Grandmama, and on and on and on. So yeah, she's taught her the joy of humor.
In the family, how do you call each other? You know how titles, sometimes it's Gammy or Gran. What are some of the ones that have been used in the Frazier family?
Actually, we're pretty conventional. Granddad and grandma. Now my oldest granddaughter, and I would jokingly get on about this, she would call her mother Mom, and I think her grandmother Mom. And so I said, hold it. You're confusing me. Is this mom or is this mom? Is this mother or this mama? And so she would laugh and we would laugh. But she that's her thing. But Mariah, I got Mariah, Michaela, and Leah. Okay. Leah's the oldest, Mariah is the youngest, and Michaela is in between. So I have no idea what Mariah will say. But she's a talker already. She doesn't know what she's saying, but she holds the conversation with you. She's good. And she'll be down in Memphis in about a week.
Oh,
So we will experience her here in Memphis. Yes.
take lots of photos.
I will.
Yes. Are there any tips about how you, as the family, have kept, is it like FaceTime or, what are the technologies you've all used?
We've used FaceTime a lot. Actually, before the pandemic, we were using just the calls, FaceTime, okay. But we've gotten on Zoom a lot too.
Good.
Since the pandemic. So we've actually done a lot of, during the first part of the pandemic, we were doing Zoom. We would have little studies, Bible studies, and we would use Zoom. And so that was very helpful. And Yada is Matthew's wife. And Yada's mother would be on Zoom too. She would be at the house. And so we just have a great time. We still use Zoom sometimes.
Yes.
And Deborah has a family reunion. This will be the 74th family reunion in a row. Her family. And so the last one was on Zoom, and this one will probably be on Zoom as well. So we use the technology to stay together.
Yes, but it's the effort that's the key thing.
It's the effort. Yes.
You can use any platform, but it's making, a family reunion of those many years. I can just imagine the different potato salads that were cooked.
It came out of that, yes.
Well, we're coming to an end. This has been such an enriching and rich dialogue.
I've enjoyed it. Yes, I've definitely enjoyed it.
If we were to both think about, this month, Older Americans Month, what do you think you would say to people that is the positives of having the bonus of longevity to be able to say, I am an older American, right? What do you think you've felt has been the blessing of becoming an older American in this nation? Why should we celebrate this month with joy?
Well, the first thing, and the most important, is that we have acquired a certain amount of wisdom and understanding. Scripture says understanding comes with age. So we have acquired that, and you don't have to get excited. You don't have to get just thrown out of sorts when something happens, because this too shall end. And it's such a comfort to know that. Whereas when you're younger, it's like, this is going to happen. This will be this way for the rest of my life. It's going to go on. And you're just in such a tizzy that you don't know what to do. And that can last up until the 40s and 50s, if you don't watch it. So, but now you say, okay, it'll be all right. And you can pass that wisdom on to somebody who doesn't know any better.
That is the best advice. Why don't we look at the back of your book? Because the I Love You So Much book has has a wonderful quote at the very end attributed to Anonymous. And what I'd like to do first is to make sure that if anybody wants to reach out to you for your pearls of wisdom, is it okay for them to reach out? I did put together an email address for you, L. Frazier Jr., and it's a Gmail. But what I love is the end quote that you had at the back, the very back. Grandchildren complete life's circle of love.
Yes.
Yes. If you'd like to send one message through the ages, because I'm sure this will live on in technology heaven, what advice, seriously, would you give your beautiful grandchildren from Grandpa Frazier?
Well, keep your spiritual life intact because it's the basis for everything else. If you have a strong spiritual connection, then you can do anything. And don't let material things overpower your reasoning and your ability to love, because love is what it's really all about.
Thank you, Levi. And with that, we'll return it to our good friends at AARP Maryland. Thank you so much for this opportunity to have such a rich dialogue with Levi. And I just haven't seen Deborah and Levi for, I think, over 15 years. So this was such a treat. Thank you.
Thank you.
This was a treat for both of you. I'm so touched by your conversation. It's been an inspiring and warm conversation, and what a special tribute for Older Americans Month and Teacher Appreciation Week. Levi, I love your whole story. I adored hearing how your writing was a beautiful way to cope with the challenges the pandemic created for you and your family, and also a way for you to convey to them how much you love them. And of course, Lily, thank you so much for your cheerful and insightful facilitation of this segment and for introducing us to Levi, of course.
Thank you.
So again, I thank you both very much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Jennifer.
Absolutely. All right, everyone, we hope you enjoyed this extended Lunch and Learn special to honor our older adults and meaningful intergenerational bonds. Please keep tuning in every other Wednesday. We will continue to bring you fabulous guests to help us all get through the rest of this pandemic with our kids. We'll see you in 2 weeks.